Well, hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of Optimally Wellness. I am Dr. Lexi and I am joined by two amazing guests today for a celebration of gut health. So today we are going to kind of talk about all things gut with Dr. Tommy and nurse practitioner Sean Grindle from Aquarian Clinic. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you for
coming.
having me.
So we are just going to kind of have an open forum and, let's kind of define some terms before we get going. So I find in my practice, there's a kind of a big misconception around the role that the gut actually plays in our body and our health in general. People don't really fully grasp that GI symptoms are not always the red flag that comes with problems with the gut and how it can impact so many other things. What's your kind of take on that? How do you communicate that? How do you kind of open up the mind to accept really the powerhouse the gut is?
That's really tough. And like you guys were saying, it's like education's massive. It's like, how do we take these big medical terms and make them simple and to understand? And then I like to use numbers. So for me, it is like people don't understand that 90% of your serotonin is made in the gut, not in the brain. And so with an unhealthy gut, how do you feel? You're sad, you're anxious, you're depressed. And we just talk about eczema. Eczema is just a skin irritation, right? So just breaking down these terms is very, very important. And so just the term dysbiosis, right? We use these big fancy words. Any word that says DYS means like defect of, right?
Yeah.
Really, truly. And so that's just a defect of the gut biome, dysbiosis, right? So it's just breaking it down easy because it's just a lot of terms out there. So
100%. And
right?
Dysbiosis is thrown around so much. My last podcast was literally about how social media kind of catches on to these terms and kind of just like popularizes them and doesn't really offer like a true solution, but kind of just like fear mongering. Dysbiosis just means, like you said, dysfunction of or lack thereof, unbalance of the gut microbiome. And I think a really like profound fact that I love to share is that there's actually more bacteria cells in our body than human cells in our body.
Yes.
And where do those all live?
In the gut.
Absolutely. So let's think about it as cultivating a garden. So let's kind of go through, if this garden is full of weeds, if this garden is not diverse, is not profound in the types of plants and the types of flowers that live there, what are some of the symptoms that we could experience that maybe we wouldn't think of when a dysbiotic state occurs in our body?
That's a great question, honestly. And so it could be a multitude of things, right? And so the first one that comes to mind, if we're altering like serotonin, depression, anxiety, mood swings, that's one. You're just like, wait, really? Yeah. And it's not just diarrhea and like constipation. It's other things. It's skin irritation.
100%. But I think the flip side of that is the positive, I guess, is what I'm after. Is
positive.
Like there's other ways to treat anxiety, depression, mood swings.
Yes.
Besides going straight to
the medications, the
exactly.
SSRIs, the SNRIs, the things that we love together. And so that's why I love my practice, is I can do both.
Exactly.
I'm not, there are spots to where you need SSRIs, and that's fine. But, if we can avoid those, great. It's just like, how do we mitigate stress?
100%. And stress is such one of those kind of hot words. And what I like to do with all my patients when they start with me is I redefine the word stress. So how many of you have seen my extensive list of what stress means to Dr. Lexi? It's like a 50 tick sheet, because when I use the word stress, I'm talking about everything that biochemically creates stress in our body. So it's not, to me, just the anxiety, depression, work-life balance, emotional components of stress that I feel like when we focus it as that, I feel a lot of women that I work with get overwhelmed because they say, well, I can't control my husband stressing out, or my children, or my job right now, or my mother-in-law, or my toxic whatever.
Right.
But when you realize that there's also 50 other things that are pouring into that biochemical stress fault that you can control, such as avoiding processed foods, different biochemicals and toxic exposures in the environment, that maybe we do have a little bit of autonomy to limit. We can make profound impacts on lowering the biochemical stress responses in our body without having to focus on the things that maybe emotionally we can't heal right now. And stress, by my definition, is what we can start to treat our gut with, right? So what are some ways that someone listening to this can make simple changes to affect or lower stress in their life?
Fantastic question. So there's different perspectives, like you said. It's not all about your external factors, stress, work, life, and things of that nature. It's also about what you put into your body. I always teach my patients, your body is your temple, right? It's a temple. So I always recommend high fiber. These are things that we just kind of talked about earlier. Is like fiber's huge. Most Americans don't even get one serving amount, and that's staggering to me. I'm like, wow, we should really change these things. And so diet's huge. Watching those processed foods, as you know, and I really believe that every human should be on some sort of like probiotic or prebiotic, because we miss those in our diets.
So I'm going to kind of agree to disagree with you there. So I've done a lot of research on probiotics and prebiotics, and kind of through my practice, and as you know, I don't do any medication route. So everything I do has to be really high quality, natural, and food based. So I kind of obsess over it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And what I found is, one serving of kefir, for example, has 100,000 times more live cultures in it than any store-bought probiotic that we could consume. So yes, you're correct that probiotics are important when we're not addressing that in our diet. But in the long run, they actually did a study and they found that if you stay on a supplemental probiotic for many, many months at a time, you're actually going to create the same dysbiotic and species favoritism in the gut as you're trying to correct.
So yeah, I can understand that one, and so there are different strains that are more important than others, and as you said, in the diet, I would prefer you to have it in your diet, hands down.
Yeah.
But think about the Western life.
Oh, 100%.
Think about the Western life. How much time do you have to go to the store and go get that item, or keep it in your refrigerator and then expires?
Well, you don't. And even think about like how many other cultures, like fermented foods, for example, are not a staple in our diet. We are not exposed to those. They're not a norm as far as like us even fermenting at home. And that is such a untapped resource that can provide naturally so much more to our gut than taking something over the counter. I use probiotics. I use prebiotics all the time in my treatment methods with patients. But I have them come on, come off, rotate different species and strains in different brands. But really the long-term goal for me would be to teach them how to be exposed to that in natural means through dietary changes. So let's kind of talk about, I have a recipe here if you don't mind.
Go for it.
On like really easy. Everybody's fussy today.
Sorry, I know, guys. Sad babies. It's okay. it's fine.
But really easy ways to do fermentation in-house. And it's lactofermentation. So it's the most simple way to ferment veggies. But you can do this with almost any vegetable that you want. So, kimchi, cabbage, garlic, turnips, cucumbers, radishes are some that I've used in the past. But it's such a simple thing, and you can do it in a mason jar. So you literally slice up your vegetables, you add in water and a brine. The brine you can get pretty creative with as far as different flavorings or things that you want to add. Some people like to do herbs, dill, garlic. It doesn't really matter, fennel. But the main ingredient that you have to have is some sort of acid and sugar. So you have to do a starter of some sort for the bacteria to essentially eat. And then as the bacteria eat, they produce their off-puttings, which is what actually creates the process of fermentation. And then we'll ferment your veggies. And this is something that in other parts of the world is a staple.
Common staple, especially in Asia. That's why I love kimchi. But not everyone loves kimchi, right?
No, so you can get creative in kind of how you can introduce this into your life. But right here, literally, it's just 2 cups of water, 1 tablespoon of sea salt, 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, and then you can get creative with jalapeno, carrot, cauliflower, celery, bay leaf, cabbage leaf, boom. Stick it in a mason jar. Put it on tight, let it sit for a couple of days, and eat those veggies. And you can make it spicy, not spicy, salty, not salty. You can make it to your taste. It's that in-depth process of fermentation that allows those cultures to start to reproduce, and that's what makes that beneficial. Right. So again, kind of just very simple things that we're not exposed to here on a regular basis that can make a big, big difference. So just to kind of touch on food, that's something that I like to bring into a lot of this. But let's kind of talk about what the microbiome does when we eat food.
Yeah, that's a good point. So think of it as like a means to help you absorb your vitamins, your nutrients, your things, right?
Yeah.
And as we kind of eat our diet, those it also helps us make things like B12. So there's an item inside your body called intrinsic factor that needs to make B12 an energy for. And so it just kind of breaks down those things and kind of helps keep your gut nice and clean and healthy and keeps things moving along. So, yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that it is actually the bacteria in our digestive tract that is eating the food, that is creating the vitamins that we need to thrive.
Right.
And different strains of bacteria are responsible for digesting different food groups and producing different vitamins and nutrients. So if you are not balanced or high number, high volume in different species, sure. You can create nutritional deficiencies in very discrete groups, or you can develop metabolic issues in digesting, for example, proteins, carbohydrates, sugars, whatever, fats, based on the health of your gut microbiome.
True.
And a lot of people just have no idea that it's actually bacteria that are allowing you to create or to take, vitamins out of the food you're consuming. So that to me was kind of a profound moment in my practice when I realized that that wasn't understood on a wide basis.
So that's a good point. It's like, us in the allopathic world, we're not taught that really, truly. So these are things that we have to learn on our own.
Yeah.
And so once you start to learn, then you start to like, oh, all right, well, this is what we need to do. I would rather you get things out of your diet. That's how we were built.
Sure.
But the Western day life has kind of caught up to us, and we haven't caught up to it.
100%, and that is such an issue with like our lifestyle is obsessed.
Go.
Fight or flight, sympathetic. And let's bring Dr. Tommy into this conversation because I know this is his fave. So if we live this Western life that is go, fight or flight, and I'm going to come back to mealtime habits after he's done and how that alone cannot prepare our body to get vitamins and nutrients out of what we're eating. But how does that chronic stress, that chemical state, that neurological state that we live in now far too often, impact our gut and our ability to utilize and absorb the foods that we're consuming?
I like to kind of take a step back and let's go and talk about stress again. When you look at chronic stress and when you look at what stress is and what it does to the body, when you have stress, whether you cut your toe, whether you eat something that hurts your stomach, or whether you have a thought that endogenously creates pain in your system, you actually internally create what we're going to call pro-inflammatory mediators. There are cytokines, there are interleukin-7s, interleukin-6. There are actual cell mediators that you internally create that tell your brain to feel pain. So whatever neuron is going to your brain to express the feeling of pain, the ingredients to telling it to fire that pain signal are the interleukin-6, the interleukin-7, the cytokines, the pro-inflammatory mediators that we're actually endogenously creating. So I think in society as a whole, I was just reading a study the other day and it was talking about how not Americans, just people in general, we get hyperfixated on one type of fiber. And I love that Dr. Lexi was bringing it up like it's a garden, because how many gardens have you guys seen that you have thought are beautiful? Many different varieties of gardens exist that you might find are beautiful and that give a positive, let's call it positive vibes. Let's call it that. Yes, the garden's beautiful. There's so many different ways that we can make up our own beautiful garden inside of our gut through different kinds of good micro gut biota. And it's almost like we're testing the waters to see what kind of superhumans we can become by creating the most perfect garden. And so it's always kind of an experiment to change and try different biota, different gut biota that we can add to our system to alter what kind of beautiful garden we're creating to kind of see the different symptomatologies that we're capable of. Maybe we can eat things that are going to derive us to have beautiful skin. Maybe we can eat things that are going to derive us to have excellent brain functioning and enhance our focus, enhance our ability to fight off anxiety. but that got my brain going a little bit.
Well, what about so have you read the study about autism and how they've discovered now that through sampling essentially stool from, I don't remember the number, but several, no, from humans with autism, they found a consistency in the percentages of different bacteria that were present in their microbiota as compared to neurotypical individuals. So now they're seeing that there's actually a huge, like you were stating in the beginning of this talk, actual diagnosis of neurodivergent conditions, be it dyslexia, autism, anxiety, whatever, linked to different populations of bacteria within our bodies, and how they can then use probiotics, prebiotics, even stool sampling, or what is it called when you seeding with stool, to quote cure or improve the symptomatology of these type of neurological conditions in children and adults.
Right.
I mean, how profound is that? That's a whole new world of study.
Well, we do that already with persons that have C. diff, and then we do stool transplants with them, and they get cured of that, right?
Oh yeah.
And well, hopefully that's the theory, right? But that's what we do as well. And not only that, we've seen transplants of stool from persons that are of a healthy weight transplanted into a person that is of a bigger weight, and we've seen them lose weight. So there's some relation. Yeah.
You focus on weight loss in your clinic, is that correct? So
Huge.
What do you find are some of the main, I guess let's call them roadblocks to women? I do a lot of hormone health, hormone balancing. That's kind of a separate conversation, from what I want to focus on today. Maybe we can have you back and we can tit for tat on that. But gut-wise, so dietary-wise, bacteria-wise, stress-wise.
Right.
What are some main roadblocks to, people losing weight? And why is that so difficult in the American lifestyle that we've lived today for that to have a healthy functioning metabolism?
I think it's eating habits.
Yeah.
Really, that's the one thing, that's what makes up 75% of all of your weight loss.
Yeah.
Is eating. I mean, exercise is good, but it's like 30%. I only encourage that because of it helps with cardiovascular health, right?
Yeah.
So it's food, and it's getting food on the go. Mom's got kids, they want chicken nuggets. Mom eats chicken nuggets, right?
Yeah.
So it's time. It's being able to balance these things as well. And eating processed foods is just a bad thing, right? And then skipping meals. Skipping meals is like the worst.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
And that's 90% of the women I work with over-exercise and under-eat.
Yes.
And that's just, and they think, well, I'm calorie restricting. I'm in, caloric
But you're
surplus.
also having muscle atrophy, and now you've dropped your BMR by 10%. Your hair's falling out. Your biceps
is
low.
Anymore, and and your skin is dry, and you're pumping your face full of Botox, and it's like, this is not rocket science. Like you're saying, it is mealtime habits. And that brings me back to the point I was going to say when Dr. Tommy was mentioning, the fight or flight is one of the first things that I work with my women is mealtime habits. So if you are eating on the go, you're shoving food in your mouth, there's no neurological connection between your brain and your gut.
Yep.
And we do a whole talk on our gut-brain connection, because if your body is in fight or flight, you're in stress, you're in sympathetic mode, your body is shunting all the blood and all the nervous activation from your digestive system, your reproductive system, into survival mode. So into your heart, into pupil dilation, into your muscles, to try to run away from that bear. Because this is a primitive neurological state that served us for survival in the primitive existence years. It doesn't serve us anymore because now we're living in it all the time.
Yeah, as I said before, it's like our bodies haven't caught up to the new Western way of life.
100%.
Maybe
we will,
It may take not right now, not soon, but I mean, evolution takes time.
It does, and we're going so fast. If you think about the changes within even what are we all in our 30s about? Within our lifetime, for technology and alerts and we're all in medicine. So the high stress that we've put ourselves through just to
we're the
get
worst
to where
patients at times, right?
100%.
We run around and do our own thing. So it's like do as I say, not as I do, right? So
100%.
But we're getting better. Yeah.
We're getting better, but the problem is when your body is shunting all of its activation and resources to a survival mechanism, you're not producing salivary enzymes. You're not producing
rest and digest, right? You're not resting in having so you can't.
So
rest
you
and digest.
can't even break down the food that you're about to eat. So your body's given this food and it just goes right through you, and your insulin isn't ready to respond to that glucose jump. Your stomach acid isn't being produced. Your gallbladder is not pumping bile because you haven't sat there and told your body you're about to receive food.
Right.
And then to your point, we don't eat in a consistent pattern, predictable pattern. So our adrenal glands are old ladies. They like to know what's coming their way and when. They want to know when they get sleep, when they get exercise, and when they get fed.
It's hard.
And it's very hard to maintain, especially as a mom, especially as a professional, any type of consistency, because we put ourselves last. But you can't pour from an empty cup, ladies. And I have to eat my own words on that one because I am not.
I get it. I just said that, right? So that's a good point. And so, going back to your theme here is, with that cortisol rises, what else rises? Sugar.
Oh, yeah.
Diabetes, right?
Yeah.
High blood pressure, because that cortisol is helping to be able to constrict.
Yep.
Those tighten of those vessels, and that's what causes coronary artery disease, high blood pressure. What's going on here as well, right?
100%, which is the epidemic of all epidemics, right? So, we want to obsess about COVID, and now I'm going to take elderberry and vitamin C and quercetin every day of my life.
And I'm fixed.
But you know what? What's killing us? What's killing us every day? We're not addressing, and that's our lifestyles, and that's our diet.
And you look at a lot of like Eastern medicine techniques on how they handle dealing with a lot of pathology in today's world. It's almost, if Western medicine would just embrace the turning down of the sympathetic nervous system and how do we simply turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, they would just hyper focus on getting those rest and repair centers back and firing. I think we'd see significant symptomatology reduction, because let's face it, when you remove inflammation from the diet, whether it's food sensitivity testing or working with, gut dysbiosis or working with, even spinal fixations, when you remove inflammation from the body, you simply are turning down the sympathetic nervous system. And what turns on when that turns down? The parasympathetic nervous system. So as a whole in society and lifestyle, we have this epidemic because of immobility, because of not looking up, not using our peripheral neurons. These neurons are wrapped in parasympathetic nervous system fibers. So if you're not engaging in neck extensor activation, I don't want to lose anybody here, but cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, and 10 are wrapped in parasympathetic nervous system fibers. Now, the cranial nerve I want you guys to hyper-focus on is cranial nerve 10, the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve, it wraps around all of your gut, your intestines. It wraps around your lungs. It innervates so much of your organs' function. So when you are seeing an individual who's dealing with any pathology, what are the typical presentations? Maybe you have heart rate escalated, or some tachycardia. You have some respiration elevated, blood pressure elevated. These are all signs of sympathetic nervous system turned up. So how do we turn that down? Parasympathetic nervous system is going to turn that down. Respiration rate down, blood pressure down, heart rate down. Your parasympathetic nervous system ganglia, essentially the nuclei, the engines that are supposed to be operating this system, reside in your cervical spine and also your lumbosacral spine. So when people get fixated, when I adjust their cervical spine, on average, I'll see a 10 to 15 millimeter mercury drop in blood pressure just from a cervical adjustment, because we're directly impacting the rostral, ventral, lateral medulla, which is supposed to be monitoring, regulating blood pressure. So imagine taking something like that into the hospital where somebody's getting a blood pressure reading of 131 over 82, call it whatever you may, and they're getting a diagnosis of hypertension, stage 1 hypertension. But if they were get adjusted beforehand to turn back on their parasympathetic nervous system to bring down the blood pressure, now let's say it drops 10 millimeters of mercury, and then all of a sudden it's at 119 over 81, and they're out of that diagnosis pathological range of hypertension, then all of a sudden they're no longer a candidate for medication. People need to realize that with Western society, it's diet, it's immobility, it's not using our peripheral neurons that are wrapped in these parasympathetic nervous system fibers, that we're not turning on this rest and digest system, which is going to coincide and have a great impact on our ability to create the neurotransmitters, which we're going to feel, to absorb the vitamins. And another thing that's really important to mention is your vitamins are binders. When you eat and you're actually absorbing your vitamins in your gut, they're supposed to be grabbing toxins and metals out to your body and helping you purge. So it's double negative. We're building up these toxins, we're building up all these negative things in our gut, and we're not able to purge it because we're not absorbing the things that we're supposed to absorb. everybody to a degree has some kind of leaky gut. If you look at all of our intestinal linings and you stretch them out across, called a football field, you would find intestinal impermeability somewhere along that track where toxins are leaking in, food particulates are leaking in and causing that negative cascade. So everybody needs to face the reality that you need to do some kind of food sensitivity testing. You need to do some kind of inflammatory investigation and see, how do I correct my gut? How do I make my gut optimized? How do I turn it into the most beautiful garden that it can be to turn on my parasympathetic nervous system, so that way I can live the longest and healthiest life that I can, because these are vagal nerve functions. It's hugely vagal nerve input. So again, that's kind of to go back to answer your question in a roundabout way. It's so important to be working on all this stuff for proper neurology and have proper neuroplasticity going on in the brain, because if you're not activating 100% of the neurons in those areas of the brain, how can you expect to activate the other neurons that are supposed to be having other functions in that area of the brain as well?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Exactly. Just kind of moving into the chronic disease world, there's still testing, right? We still need to make sure you don't have ulcerative colitis, Crohn's,
100%.
those things, right? And so, there's still a role in which we all can kind of work together and say, all right, here's the allopathic method, is what's going on. We can treat and have this, but still, again, changing that diet, still changing that will still help that condition, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, the way that hopefully our generation, which I titled this podcast, The Next Generation in Integrative Healthcare, because I think that we are the first generation that's open to holding hands and embracing both sides of the coin. And when that divide heals is when we'll be providing the best care for our patients.
Do you see like the chiropractic operating in the hospital doing those type of things?
Yeah, so in different states, chiropractic still has a very diverse scope of practice across state lines. Yeah. So in some states, mostly where honestly there's a large chiropractic college, it's making them a lot of money.
Money talks, right?
Money talks, but even in Orlando, for example, there's chiropractors working with UCF Medical School, teaching at UCF Medical School. There's specialization programs now where chiropractors are actually going through rotation as residents in different states. There's one in Iowa that's specifically a 3-year rotation with radiology in the hospital to become a chiropractic radiologist. It's moving that direction, but unfortunately, it's actually our own elders in our own field that are blocking the way because they do not want to integrate, because they do not want to
practice allopathic
at all, and they actually kind of vilify it. And that's not correct.
Well, that was our medicine colleagues too, though.
Sure.
Not too long ago is our MD colleague looked down at our DO colleagues. And that wasn't long ago. And now they're respected as the same. So I expect the same progression to happen as we kind of move along. It's like, we all know our scopes, NP, PA, DC, MD, DO. We all have our own different thing. And so that's what we need to know.
I think so too. And, and work together to figure out the best way to treat people who want different types of treatment too, and to offer that. And, I kind of want to wrap up today and offer a Q&A, but let's kind of go around and end on a positive note. Let's kind of give like each of us top 3 things that we could do to improve our gut health today. So what are 3 easy things? Mine is going to be improve mealtime habits. Think about your food. Sit down and eat your food. Smell your food.
You stole mine. It's fine.
Oh, I'm
sorry.
It's fine.
It's
a really good one.
It's a good one. Solid.
So I'll just do one then. Well, I'll give one. Okay, so that'll be mine. Go ahead.
That's perfect. No, great. Just limit fast food.
There you go.
Or I would say like eliminate, but then again, there's still healthy options out there. I mean, so that'd be a good one, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like you were talking about too, you already made a good one, was introducing more fiber and probiotics.
Bingo. That's huge.
So that's an easy one.
Yeah. Easy.
That's such a good one, honestly.
Right?
It's so important for just fiber.
You can take it if you want,
I wanted to steal it.
Take it.
No, I'm going to say turning on the brain, just finding a way to get out there and activate your vestibular systems, getting out there, activate your peripheral neurons. These are things that we're not doing daily, which our bodies not only are craving, but we're needing. And the second you go out there, and I know it sounds silly, but you get back on that merry-go-round, or you start doing some of those activities you did as a child, cross-crawl activities, jumping jacks, you're going to feel better. You're going to feel more alert. You're going to increase your focus. You got to
stop doing this,
back.
right?
Yep.
Right.
Peel back that brain fog, activate your muscles, and feel as good as you possibly can, because you don't know 100% until you're at 100%. So I try to tell that to all my patients.
So that's super cool, because that's like 3 different specializations input on the same topic, and everybody had a number one that was slightly different that can all add into improving your
And
health.
they're easy and actionable.
They're so easy and actionable, and they can make such a, I like to say I practice in the preventative medicine field.
Bingo.
So like, you want to end up not going into the route of getting colonoscopies and endoscopies and all these autoimmune issues.
Exactly.
Like, let's be preventative. And there's space for that. And I think that that's beautiful. So I'll open the floor to you guys. Does anybody have any questions for any of us up here? We're an open book. It doesn't even have to be on this topic.
It can be anything.
So you can pick our brains. We're here. Anybody brave enough?
I'll point out, I'm going to say one thing too. Whatever autoimmune conditions or whatever pathologies that you have in your familial lineage, whether it's cancers, autoimmune disorders, whatever you have that's going to express, and let's say that it might be eating at you at the back of your head, like, oh, my grandmother died of breast cancer, my mother died of breast cancer, and I know I carry that gene. This is the first line of defense to preventing that disease from expressing itself. Because again, when you think of what makes a disease in our genetic lineup express, it's pro-inflammatory exposure. It's free radical exposure.
Which leads to mutation.
Which
mutation leads to the disease.
And then boom, you're dealing with whatever your parents or your grandparents had. So
and also get those screenings still too, though.
Absolutely.
Get your mammograms, your colonoscopies, all the things.
I'm glad you said that because it's so important. Like, get an idea of what you're going to be dealing with and have something. I mean, it's 2023. Use technology to your advantage now and figure out how to live the longest life you can, because the first line of defense is going to be get inflammation out of your life so you don't create those free radicals, so you don't express that pathology, increase your longevity, increase your vitality, and again, just motivating people. You don't realize how good you can feel until you remove all that inflammation.
So that's an easy body hack, right? Everyone loves the word body hacking, right?
Yep. That's what goes back to genes. Like, body hacking is huge, and what's going to be the primary ingredients to treatment, to starting the journey.
I love my genetic
anti-inflammatory
tests. I read them
living.
like they're books. It's a problem, but it's the way of the future. So if nobody has any questions, we will wrap up. But I'll open the floor one last time. Any takers? Awesome. Well, thank you guys for coming, and I hope you learned something new. And this was so fun for me. So thank you again. And we will turn off all the lights and the cameras, and we can just mingle. And please take some food. And thank you guys.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Of course, you're welcome.